What happens if you die in Germany as a foreigner? To be honest, I've been wondering this for a long time, and I wondered, is it even worth to make this video? So I started doing research for this video, and on a Monday morning, I found the following question on Reddit. If I suddenly die and I don't have any family members in Germany, what's going to happen? Who's going to tell my employer? What's going to happen to my apartment and the stuff inside it? Who's going to cancel all my contracts and handle all the bills? What happens to my dog? What happens to my bank account? We think these are very important questions, and I'm glad someone else has asked it because it tells me that maybe others are wondering what will happen if you die in Germany as a foreigner. So in this video, we would like to talk about what actually happens when you die in Germany in general, and also as a foreigner. And we would like to talk about 4 steps that you could take to prepare better if such a thing ever happens. Hey, my name is Jen, and I'm from Guatemala.
And mine is Yvonne, and I'm German.
And together we're from simplegermany.com, where we create English content to empower internationals to settle into life in Germany more smoothly. So the first question is, what happens when you die in Germany? There's mainly 2 main aspects to it. Number 1 is who finds your body, and the second one is who tells your family about your death.
Now, to the question of who finds your body really depends on the circumstance that you die. And there's 2 options. You either die at home or you die in public or in a hospital. Now, if you die at home of natural causes and it is clear that it is not a medical emergency, if you live with others, your other flatmates, family, whoever you're living with, should call your house doctor. If the person doesn't know your house doctor, or if the house doctor is not available, then you should either call the 116, 117, which are doctors on call in Germany, or simply 112, and they will direct you accordingly. If you live alone and you're dying at home, then someone will eventually find your body. Neighbors, friends, the police, it highly depends on the circumstance. And if you die in public or in a hospital, then first responders will know what to do and which steps to take.
Now, the second thing is who informs your family or nearest people about your death. So we have not gone through the situation, luckily, I would say. So it's very hard to talk from experience. However, I did my best to prepare for this video by calling the Guatemalan embassy, the police, talking to hospitals and funeral homes. And based on all the research that I did, this is what we think will happen next. If you die at home and you have your next of kin there with you and they already find out about your death, then they are already notified. Hopefully your next of kin will know what to do next. If you, however, die and your next of kin is not around and hasn't been informed, then efforts will be made to contact your next of kin after you've been proclaimed dead by a doctor. Now, if your next of kin live in Germany, most likely the police will be able to contact them because of the information they have about you when you registered in the city. However, if your next of kin does not live in Germany, this is where things become a little bit more complicated. First disclaimer is that as far as our research shows, the medical staff, they say that they cannot provide medical information to non-family members. Meaning if you have a really close friend in Germany and they would like to get informed, if you haven't prepared for the situation, they just cannot get that information, simply by legal grounds, I think. Now, going back to the situation where your next of kin is not in Germany and you're not German, then the medical staff or the professionals or police, I think, will then contact your embassy, your local embassy. And then in the case of the Guatemalan embassy, who I spoke to, they will make their best efforts to contact, if I die, for example, because I'm Guatemalan, my next of kin outside of Germany. Let's say I'm not married to Yvonne in this case, right? I'm a single person living alone.
However, in Jen's case, if I'm out of the picture, the Guatemalan embassy would do its best to contact Jen's family in Guatemala. However, they don't know, or it's not so easily accessible, the information that Jen's family doesn't even live in Guatemala anymore, but in the US. So the paper trail of actually connecting Jen to her next of kin family abroad is very difficult. And this is why we decided to do this video. You can actually prepare in case anything like this happens so your family can be informed faster and better.
Also important to find out, as far as our research shows, is that your next of kin or heir are the responsible ones for taking care of paying for the funeral costs. Now, even if you don't want to be buried in Germany, you want to be taken back to your home country. If you have not prepared for this at all, again, this is the scenario that you have nothing in place, then it's their responsibility to pay the thousands of euros that will incur by the funeral home taking care of your body.
There is no way around a funeral home in Germany. by law, a dead body kind of like needs to be handled by a funeral home. There's no other way. And a funeral home costs money.
Even in the case of body repatriation, if I said that correctly, again, the funeral home needs to be involved. So just to make it clear, there's no way around these costs, unfortunately.
So if you have never thought about this question or taken steps to prepare a little bit, your family will not only be left devastated and grieving, but also with a mountain of bureaucratic steps to take that they have probably no idea about, and several thousand euros in cost.
So we believe it's important to have a plan in place in the case that you do die in Germany. So for this, we have prepared like a 4-step process kind of way, and we'll start with step number 1, and that is define your wishes.
The first step is to take some time and actually think about the question and what is it that you would really like to happen. To be honest, Jen and I, we had talked about this topic before, but doing the research for this video just kind of like refreshing those thoughts and discussions and made us really evaluate what we want and how to go about it. So here are the 3 options that we could think of. Number 1 is you would like to be repatriated and taken to your home country to be buried there. Number 2 is you'd like to be buried in Germany. And number 3 is you would like to donate your body for scientific research.
So for the first option of you wanting to be buried in your home country, this can be relatively simple or complicated depending on the way you want to go about it. So the German name for this process is called
Auslandsüberführung or Überführung ins Ausland.
And you can,
which is body repatriation.
Now, there's 2 ways that your body can be repatriated from Germany to go back home. One of them is to be in a coffin with your whole body, and the other one is to be cremated in Germany and for someone to pick up the urn and take it back home. In both cases, you need a funeral home to do the whole paperwork for you. You cannot leave Germany without the official paperwork usually handled by a funeral home.
Well, not just the paperwork, also to prepare your body, either to cremate you or to prepare the corpse for transport also, right?
Yes. And out of both options, the one with the coffin is more expensive because of legal and shipping costs. And the most affordable one is to be cremated and taken in an urn. So some paperwork that I found out is needed is, for example, a Leichenpass, which is a mortuary passport, as well as the multiple certificates that allow your body to be leaving Germany or the ashes to be leaving Germany. Important note here to highlight is that in Germany, by law, family members never get the urn with ashes in them unless the ashes are being taken out of Germany. So that's why it's important to hire a funeral home to help you with the whole process. As far as my research shows me, talking also with the Guatemalan embassy, they mentioned that taking my ashes, for example, back home is relatively simple. I just need someone to pick the ashes up, have the necessary paperwork, and I could be transported in a hand luggage. And only in entering Guatemala and leaving Germany, I need to show the paperwork. I know someone would need to show the paperwork. And it sounded relatively not complicated.
But of course, it highly depends on the country where you're being transported, because other countries might have other regulations, especially when the corpse is involved and not ashes. So the funeral home, again, is your ally who assists you in that process. The second option is to be buried in Germany. And there you pretty much have 2 choices. Same as before, you can either be buried in a coffin or you can be cremated and buried in an urn. It's important to point out that you do not need to be a German citizen to be buried in Germany. By law, funerals and burials in Germany need to happen in a cemetery or a similar ground that is made for burial. So a coffin needs to go to a cemetery, and an urn, you have more options. You could be buried at sea, in the North Shores of Germany. You could be buried in certain forests that are made for resting in that sense. They're called Friedwald. And there are a few other options, usually pricier ones, that can happen to your ashes. If you would like more information, you can read our guide that we link in the description below about funeral traditions, custom laws, and all the aspects about that. Important again, you need to go through a funeral home.
The third option is to donate your body for scientific studies. This option is not so well known. The reason why we know about this is because Yvonne's granny did this, and she donated her body to the anatomy department of a university, where medical students can use the body for the next 2 years to learn about the anatomy of a human.
So my granny chose to do this for 2 reasons, I believe. 1, because she's always been a very kind human and likes to support others. And 2 is because this option actually removes the financial and bureaucratic strain of the next of kin, of the family. Because in this case, the University of Bonn, the anatomy department, will take care of the funeral in 2 years' time. Usually after 2 years, her body and others will be released together and buried at the hospital's graveyard with a ceremony.
You do not need to be a German citizen to apply for this. I called the university clinic here in Düsseldorf, Uniklinik is called, and they provided me the following information. For someone to apply, they need to be at least 40 years and older. When I told them my age, they were like, wow, you're really young. I'm like, yes, I'm just curious how the process works. And then you need to fill out a form, and pretty much that's it. What is actually interesting is that the Uniklinik here in Düsseldorf, they told me that currently they don't have new openings, so to speak. And for the next 2 to 3 years, actually, applications are closed. Also, another important thing to point out is that usually these hospitals, they accept body donations from a certain radius. In certain websites, we also read that one needs to live at least 30 kilometers from the university hospital. I guess because transportation needs to be relatively quick to be able to enter the system in the program. So that is 2 interesting points to consider.
Another aspect is, of course, that your body needs to be in a proper state. So it's most likely if you died of an accident, for example, a car accident, and there's damage to your body, that then you can also not donate it. If you're curious about this topic and would like to maybe contact your local hospital, it needs to be like an Uniklinik with a research center. You can Google for Körperspende plus your city.
Yes. Oh, and another interesting point is that the gentleman on the Uniklinik of Düsseldorf told me that if you do get accepted, you get an ID card that you should carry with you at all times. So in the case you do end up going to a hospital or a medical staff finds it, they know who to contact to take care of the next steps with your body. Once you have defined your wishes, then it's time to move to step 2, which we think it's an optional but maybe very important step.
Interesting, definitely.
Yeah, and that is to contact a German funeral home.
Although it may sound weird to contact a funeral home if you're our age, it actually gave us very important insights and calmed us down quite a lot to know that there's someone to assist you and to support you. Because again, like I said before, the funeral home is your best ally. They know the bureaucratic steps. They know how to handle grieving family. They are emotionally detached and can really guide you through the process. And most importantly, there is no way around a funeral home. And they do incur a certain amount of costs. So if you'd like to be informed, contact one in your city.
The way I found a funeral home is by Googling Bestatter plus Düsseldorf, and I had a list of multiple ones. I ended up calling one called Duvel-Bestattungen, and I spoke to Christian, all in English. He was super nice and helpful and was very patient in guiding me through the process and answering all my questions. One important thing to highlight is just by you talking to a funeral home, it does not tie you by any means to a contract or anything. You can ask all the questions, get a quote, and only if you decide to go with them, then do you sign the official paperwork, so to speak. Now, what I learned from my conversation with Christian was very interesting. Actually, things I never thought of knew or even knew that it existed in Germany. First one is that there is a dedicated escrow account one can set up for funeral costs. And this is called Treuhandkonto. And this one, as far as he explained it to me, one sets aside the necessary amount for my wishes to be taken care of. And then only when I die and only by this funeral home can that amount be taken out. So this kind of like protects the assets from being spent on any other costs by anyone else kind of thing. We think this strategy, so to speak, might be super interesting for people that are completely alone in Germany and don't have any family members. In our case, we don't think it's necessary because if I die, Yvonne has access to our funds and then she can pay my wishes with that money. I got an offer from Christian for my wishes, which was to be cremated in Düsseldorf. And that was around 2,500 euros. Also, what I found super interesting when we talked over the phone is that Christian also mentioned that any other wishes that I had can be implemented. I saw him as a sparring partner, kind of like I could tell him everything that I wanted and they would take care of it. That would include maybe contacting family members, letting him know. I asked him, what if I have a dog and I live alone? He's like, yeah, you can tell me your wishes because otherwise it gets taken to the Tierheim, which is the dog shelter. So I really felt that I could give him all my information and he would take care of it.
They also would cancel any contracts except for banks and rental contracts for you. So your mobile phone, your gym membership, anything that you have going on, the funeral home would cancel for you.
So this service is called like prepayment of the funeral services. And when you do that, you also get an ID card that you should also carry with you at all times. So in case you do die, the hospital knows who to contact. Another interesting thing is that the Christian told me that if another funeral home wants to, they call it start a case with my body, in their database, they will be able to see that I already have an account or I am linked to their funeral home. So then that funeral home would contact the one that I made a contract with. So it seems to be very transparent and very logistically taken care of in that sense.
Step number 3 is prepare an emergency card.
Now, I believe this is my personal opinion, that if I put myself, let's say my situation, right? I'm not married to Yvonne. I'm alone in Germany. I'm Guatemalan. And if something happens to me and I end up in a hospital and I have no ID with me, how are they going to know who I am and who to contact? So this is where the idea of having an emergency card comes into my mind, or ideally one should have an ID, right? But with an emergency card, maybe there's more information that can be provided to the medical staff. And actually, upon Googling, I found multiple services and one can order an emergency card. There's one from TK also that one can fill out and also carry at all times. We leave that one also in the description box below. And throughout this research, I decided, you know what, I'm going to create our emergency cards. And I ended up creating one really basic, which looks like this at the front. But what's interesting is at the back, there's a QR code. When you scan it, it just goes to a Notion page. If you have Notion and if you want that like template, you can grab it from, I will leave it in the description box below. And that Notion template just shows more information than here. But here it's like, I put Jane Doe because I'm not going to give you my data, right? But here is like first name, last name, how tall I am, what is my weight, what is my blood type, who is my emergency contact, and also more information in terms of like I have a nut allergy or if I have diabetes. And another thing also super interesting that I saw, and I think it's quite important, is to have like an emergency note. And here is like dog alone at home. So people know that, okay, there's a puppy at home that maybe if something happens to you, they can take care of or go at your place and look at it. So I found actually this idea quite important. I created one for Yvonne and myself to have in our wallet at all times.
And again, most importantly, I always go back to the case that if you as a foreigner are alone in Germany without any family, I could only think that you probably have a friend who would like to be contacted if something happens to you. But that friend, again, cannot be talked to by medical staff. And in the information, the QR code, you can have other documents there that allows the doctors to talk to your friend, which you can put down there. It's very forward thinking. It's a very proactive approach. But just by asking those questions, this is what we came up with, so that again, you simplify the paper trail for the responsible parties involved and give them the permission to act in your wishes.
I would be curious if you are a first responder in Germany and if you would find this emergency card, would you use it? I would love to read the comments below to understand if this is something that it's used by the medical staff or can be used in that sense, right?
If you're finding value in this video, then please also be sure to like it. We know it's a difficult topic, but it's a super important topic. And if you'd like to receive more content from us via our channel, Simple Germany, please be sure to support us and subscribe to it.
And if you want to go the extra mile and support research like this, independent research, you can always buy us a virtual coffee at simplegermany.com/coffee. Thank you for your support.
And step number 4 is to prepare a When I Die folder. It sounds very macabre, but again, throughout this research, we realized how important this is. We actually went out and bought red folders just because we thought red is, attention grabbing if someone looks through your house or your documents and needs to find the information. And we will be filling our folders with crucial documents that your family, your friends, again, whoever is there, will need to actually start the process of potentially a body repatriation. Imagine this folder to be sort of like a handover of your life to whoever you leave behind. I was already aware that certain documents are super important, which we will mention a few now, but others are even more so important for foreigners that I wasn't even aware of. If you don't have them or don't have access to them, there might not even be a possibility to receive a death certificate, which is crucial.
So here are some documents that you might consider adding. By no means, this is not an exhaustive list. The documents that you add, they really depend on your lifestyle and what your situation is. However, this might guide you in the right direction. Document number 1, it's a living will, or in German called
Patientenverfügung.
Yes, and this is, I would say, a very long form.
Yes, and this is, I would say, which every medical staff will ask about.
And in this case, this long medical form also has a summary of one pager that when I call the hospital, they say, you should have this one pager with you at all times.
I mean, all the things you should carry around is also not realistic, right?
Yeah. So I thought, okay, instead of carrying that, maybe a QR code, I can attach it to there, right? An additional thing. Anyways, this Patientenverfügung, we will leave the link of where you can fill one out in the description box below. It's in German, but if you translate it, it's relatively easy to add because you create all your wishes of what you want in terms of medical care if something happens to you. And at the end, it creates this PDF that you can print and then sign with the date and the location and everything. So this document, it's a place for you to write down your wishes in the case that you're no longer conscious or mentally there to make the decisions on your own. As an example, do you want to be on life support or not? Do you want to be resuscitated or not? These are questions that are asked there that you need to click yes or no. So in the case anything happens, your wishes are on paper that the medical staff will follow.
Other questions are, do you want to be an organ donor or not? And also important, this is also a place where you can name a or several people that you want the doctors to give information to. In German, it's called Schweigepflichtentbindung,
which is like a confidentiality waiver.
Another important document that often comes together with a Patientenverfügung is a Vollmacht. It's a power of attorney. There's several different Vollmachts you can pretty much distribute. Very popular is the Vorsorgevollmacht, again, a power of attorney to handle your wishes in case you are no longer able to take decisions, but you're still alive.
Meaning that you hand over that power to someone else. Right. So in the case of something happens to me, Yvonne has a Vorsorgevollmacht that she can speak on my behalf, so to speak.
While she's still alive, but also beyond her death. So there's different levels of Vollmacht. The link we leave in the description below. So there's two documents. There's the Patientenverfügung and the Vorsorgevollmacht that you can choose to fill out. And within the Vollmacht, you can choose the different levels of power of attorney, whether also for banking matters or not. It's very complex, but it will guide you through the process.
Talking about power of attorneys, another important thing to consider is giving power of attorneys or a Vollmacht to your bank account. And this, you need to contact your bank account because every bank has a different process. Some is online, some you need to go in person. And in this case, you can maybe give your parents or your spouse or someone else, family member that you want them to have access to your bank account in case something happens to you.
Another document that you can choose to add to such a folder would be your will. Will in German is called Testament. And we have a whole guide that we, of course, also linked in the description below that goes into detail about what a will in Germany is, how you can write it, what is legal, what is necessary, because that highly depends on your situation.
Yes, during my research, also an interesting thing that I found is that, first of all, in Germany, if you have a handwritten will, that is also legally binding. However, when I talked to the Guatemalan embassy and I kind of suggested the fact, let's say I have 10,000 euros in my bank account that I want to leave to my mother who lives in Guatemala, as an example. The embassy suggested that actually having a notarized will was a little bit more convenient for legal reasons because now we kind of have two governments involved in the process. And in this case, also what she told me is that my mother would need to travel to Germany to prove her identity and to be able to access the bank account here. She mentioned that in Germany, actually, the heirs need to come in person to claim their heritage. It's not possible, for example, for a German bank to send the money to my mother's bank account in Guatemala. So for that, a notarized will, something legal on paper that it's official that I gave that money to her, it's more than important in such a case. Also, I would say a notarized will is super important if you have assets outside of Germany or if it's a more complicated case where you want to leave things to different parties and they're distributed all around the world. So, yeah.
In general, inheritance law in Germany may be different from your home country. In our guide, we explain a little bit who inherits what based on German law. And in this case, the notary is your sparring partner. Other documents that you should consider adding to such a folder if you decide to creating one are more important personal documents. For example, your birth certificate with a German translation. If you are naturalized like Jen as a German citizen, also I would need her naturalization certificate to actually receive her death certificate. I was not aware of that. Now I have it on top of mine and prepare a folder with it in it so that this is possible. Or even also tell my parents in case something happens to both of us that they are aware where to find this document. Otherwise, Jen could not even be declared dead officially and be buried.
We believe creating this video is not for you to like freak out and be like, oh my God, what am I going to do? More like to raise awareness. And again, I think this is a process that no one talks about. Really, I have found no information online of what happens when you die as a foreigner, really.
And I would say generally living abroad, not just in Germany.
Yeah, no one really talks about the death part because let's face it, one guarantee we have in this world is that we will die. We obviously don't know when, but the possibility is there. And the better prepared one is for death in general, not only if you're an Ausländer living in Germany, but also a person or a human in general. I think the better also family members are able to cope with the whole situation. I've experienced multiple close deaths in my family, and to be honest, no one prepared for them. And we were left with a bunch of chaos, drama, a lot of monetary costs. And it was not an easy time, not only because we had lost someone, but because we didn't know how to proceed in certain cases. And we had to make really tough choices without knowing really the wishes of someone else. So it's important to take the time to think for yourself. What do you want? And I don't know, I think it's an act of love as well to kind of prepare the things in the case something happens. In summary, we would like to review the question that this person put in Reddit and answer them individually to hopefully paint a clear picture of how you can prepare best. So, who's going to tell my employer? In this case, it needs to be your next of kin or a trusted friend that you tell them in case something happens, they know your employer. Ideally, your employer information is also in your When I Die folder, so people know who is your employer. What's going to happen to my apartment and the stuff inside of it? This would be your next of kin or friends who would need to make decisions of what to do with your things. They can keep them, donate them, sell them, in some case, throw them away.
When it comes to the rental apartment itself, it's actually super important that it is canceled by someone, because just because you die, the apartment contract doesn't end. If you're living there with a spouse and your rental contract you have it together, your spouse will automatically continue that rental contract. So there needs to be really someone canceling that rent. And this is one step no one can assist you with, also not a funeral home.
Who's going to cancel all my contracts and handle all the bills? If you already have a prepaid funeral, the funeral home can take care of canceling all your contracts in Germany, mind you. This is like gym memberships, or if you're in a Verein or any other expense that you have recurring monthly in Germany. If it's online subscriptions like Netflix and stuff like that, maybe also the funeral home can cancel them. But other things, it will need to be your next of kin or friends. Another thing a funeral home cannot cancel is bank accounts. That also will need to be handled by your next of kin.
Now, what happens to your dog or other pets in case of your death? If you did not leave instructions or maybe talk to friends and family beforehand, then your pets will most likely be taken to animal shelters. Now, what happens to your bank accounts? So your heirs will have the legal right to access them, but only after they have been identified as heirs. And they can't just walk up with your death certificate and say, hey, I'm the heir. It needs to be going through an official process. Probate courts are usually the ones that handle that. With a will, it's of course easier to identify. Without a will, it will usually follow legal succession in Germany. For courts to open or to start probate and to open your testament, as we would call it in German, it can take several months. This is why we said initially it's important to have a power of attorney of your bank accounts to family members so that they can access them in the meantime and your accounts are not frozen.
We hope this video has empowered you to take action. Again, do not leave things to chance. It's really not that hard in the terms of bureaucratic steps you need to take or things you need to do. I think it's just an emotional thing that it's not an easy process. When we talked about this with Yvonne, we even cried a little bit because I imagined me dying and I cried, then I imagined Yvonne dying and then I cried. So it's definitely not an easy process, but it's a very important one. We do not want to leave this video or leave you with this kind of like sadness in your heart. So to lighten things up, we would like to leave you with a video about the cute things Germans do. It's an oldie but goodie. You can check it out here on the left. Until next time, cheers!